and listen to it as a traditional hymn. My father used to like that hymn a lot, The Rock of Ages. We are on our 9th lesson of Daniel, which covers the 10th chapter.
So we have 4 more chapters?
There are 12 chapters of Daniel.
Oh, 2 more.
Yeah. We're on the 9th lesson, Scriptural Salvation Baptist Tabernacle. This is me, Andy Knopka. And we're going to do our weekly reading through Psalm 119. But this time I changed up the order. So, of the first 3 kids anyway. It's based on the Hebrew letter Heth. And Paul.
The Lord is my
portion.
I promise to keep your words.
Very good. Now sit down.
I think I'm still trying out to read stuff.
Yes, that was very good. Okay. Hannah.
I entreat your favor with all my heart. Be gracious to me according to your promise.
Very good.
I know how to read. I think on my ways. I turn my feet on your testimonies.
To your testimonies, but that was very good.
That was good. I turn my feet to
I hasten and do not delay to keep your commandments, though the cords of the wicked ensnare me. I do not forget your law.
At midnight I rise to praise you, because your richest and righteous rules. I am a companion for all who fear you, of those who keep your precepts.
And it was of no.
The earth, O Lord, is full of your steadfast love. Teach me your statutes. I thought it was kind of funny that right before Richard went on reading about rising at midnight, he yawned. But what I will tell you is, in the Hebrew culture, midnight to them was actually in the morning, because their days started at sundown the night before. So sundown on Friday was actually Saturday morning. So depending on what time of year it is, sundown, your day can be starting really early or late.
Nobody knows.
All right. So last week we covered a few prophecies that had to deal with time frames. More specifically, they dealt a lot with the number 70 and 7. And one of the first prophecies we talked about came out of the book of Jeremiah. And it was a 2-part one. It had to do with 2 different things, but they were both 70 years. This whole land shall become a ruin and a waste. That's part 1. And these nations shall serve the king of Babylon 70 years. So, the nations shall serve the king of Babylon was fulfilled between the years 605 to 635. 70 years. In 636, if we remember correctly, King Cyrus issued the Cyrus cylinder that looked like an ear of corn. Yeah. And it allowed everybody to return from where they came from. And that ended their captivity. It didn't end all the Jews not being in Israel forever, but that particular round of captivity was over. They were allowed to return. But this whole land shall become a ruin and a waste. In 586, a Babylonian prince went in and destroyed the temple. 70 years later, the captives that went back to Jerusalem in 516 started to rebuild the temple. So those 2 pieces of that prophecy, about 70 years, are fulfilled in 516 BC. So then, Daniel has a dream, and he's told about 70 weeks are decreed for your people. When it talks about 70 weeks, it's a week is 7 years. So 70 weeks is 490 years. So the angel comes to Daniel and says there's 490 years that you have to pay a lot of attention to. These are very important. So the first one is the word to restore and build Jerusalem. That started in 445 BC. King Artaxerxes of Persia gives the command to restore and rebuild Jerusalem. And it actually happens in the book of Jeremiah. We read about it. It lasts 49 years. They start going back. They start rebuilding. There's 441 years of this prophecy left.
You mean 441?
That's
That's
what I
he just
said.
corrected
No,
himself
you
to.
said 441. Yeah.
He corrected himself.
All right. So the second piece of this, the city of Jerusalem will be built again with squares and a moat, but in a troubled time. So in 396 BC, so after that first 49 years is done, and going on for another 434 years, the city of Jerusalem and the temple are built, and they're finished, but it's during a troubled time. They're ruled by the Persians, they're ruled by the Greeks, and that's where the Antiochus Epiphanes comes. That we learned about that one lesson that slaughtered the pig in the temple and did all those terrible things to the Jewish people. It's trouble. It's not settled. The Jews kind of have their freedom, but kind of not.
1 week is 7 years.
Well, in this prophecy, yes. But normally a week is what?
7 days.
Yeah. Yeah. So at this point, there's 7 years left in the prophecy. But the prophecy, so Jerusalem is rebuilt. The second temple is built. The Greeks come in, the Persians, the Romans. The Romans come in at the very end of this. They take over Jerusalem at the very end of this 434 years. Right after the final piece of this, before this 1 week starts, a lot of Bible prophecy ends. The Bible goes silent for quite a long time, over 400 years. It almost coincides with, we've had 434 years of prophecy, now there's going to be 420 years of silence. It talks about, at the end of the 62 weeks, it says the anointed one will be cut off. That if you actually piece it out with a Jewish year, starting from when the decree to build Jerusalem starts, it goes to 30 AD. 30 AD is when Jesus is crucified. So back then, Daniel, even before this, Daniel's still in the 500s BC. So 500 and some odd years before this, Daniel says, they're going to make the decree to build this temple. It's going to be 434 years, and then Jesus is going to get crucified. Daniel wrote this prophecy. There are a lot of scholars that say, well, there's no way that Daniel could have written this book, because his details are so accurate. He talks about these things that are going to happen. He must have written this after. But no. The book of Daniel was finished long before Bible prophecy went silent. So right now, when Jesus is crucified, there's 1 week left in the prophecy, 7 years, that have to do with the Jews. The prophecy's on pause. Right now, this 490 years, 70 weeks, we're on pause. Nothing's going to happen. So then it talks about the people of the prince who is to come. So I've mentioned before, so it says, the people of the prince who is to come shall destroy the temple. Well, the people that destroyed the temple were the Romans. And that happened in 70 AD. So that makes it so we know that the Antichrist is from somewhere in the Roman Empire. the people are a reformed Roman Empire, and the prince is the Antichrist. So what we're talking about here, when the 70 weeks, we got that 1 week left, that's 7 years, when that starts up again, it is something called the Great Tribulation. Jesus talks about it, and he actually mentions Daniel. He says, when you see the Antichrist that Daniel is talking about standing in the temple, you know that it's bad. Things have gotten bad. The Great Tribulation didn't get named that because it was rainbows and lollipops and unicorns. It is a tough, tough time. But when does it happen? There are a lot of people that try to take the 70 weeks and they try to take modern events, and you hear from a lot of people that, well, Jesus talked about wars. Ah, okay, there's a lot of wars happening, so the end must come soon. Jesus says ignore those. War is not a sign of the end. It's the beginning. It gives you an idea. There have been more wars fought in the past 200 years than there have been in most human history, but that doesn't mean it's over. Just because there's a war and somebody dropped a couple bombs doesn't mean that the Antichrist is coming tomorrow. Don't get worried about that. And he shall make a strong covenant with many for 1 week. He being the Antichrist. 1 week. So the Antichrist comes in and makes a 7-year peace treaty. The problem is that, like, I've read people who said that, well, the Roman Catholic Church is actually the Antichrist, making a 7-year peace treaty. No, that's nonsense. The United Nations is not the Antichrist. Any U.S. president that comes in is not the Antichrist. It doesn't make sense. Very specific things that the Antichrist does. And for half of the week he shall put an end to sacrifice and offering. Now, where does sacrifice and offering happen? They happen in the Jerusalem temple, which last week I showed you a picture of it. There's a Muslim mosque standing there. There's not a Jewish temple standing there. So right now, the Antichrist cannot come in and stop the sacrifice and offering because it's not happening right now. The sacrifice and offering have to be happening. There needs to be a temple there. Right now, that doesn't look like it's going to happen anytime soon. So am I worried that the Antichrist is going to come tomorrow? No. The important piece that's missing, the Jerusalem temple. We need to have a temple there. And that is the prophecies of Daniel that we looked at last week of the 70 weeks and what to keep our eyes out for.
Dad, can you tell me what time it is, or should I just go look at the time?
I don't know what time it is, Hannah. I don't know what you need to see the time for.
I just want to know the time.
Oh, she wants to know the time. Yes.
I don't know what the time is because it doesn't say it on
The time,
the
oh. Well, looks like you'll have to. You know what?
5:40.
Oh, it is?
Thanks.
Okay. Okay, good. Hannah knows what time it is now. We can continue.
Sorry.
It's a good thing that Hannah knows what time it is. So, let's... Chapter 10, the entirety of Chapter 10 is a short chapter of Daniel. But what Chapter 10 does is it serves as an introduction to the heavy prophecies of Daniel chapter 11. Daniel chapter 11 is very detailed. So what chapter 10 does is it gets us in the frame of mind to, we're going to hear some stuff that tells us what happens at the end. Some more end time prophecies. Prophecy circles, a lot of modern Bible scholars focus a lot on Daniel chapter 2, which is the prophecy of Nebuchadnezzar's statues with the gold, silver, bronze, and iron. And Bible prophecies focus a lot on Daniel chapter 9, which is the 70 weeks. So I've heard a lot about those two prophecies, read a lot of that before this week. But I don't remember hearing that much of anything about Daniel's chapter 10 through 12. And actually, a lot of times I'll sit down to work on our sermon here, and I'll have a little bit of knowledge of what we're working on, and I got stumped. It bothered me. I had a very hard time doing this lesson, Not because chapter 10 is difficult, but because it sets up chapter 11. And chapter 11, I wanted to understand it. I didn't want to give everybody false information. I wanted to know what it was talking about because it's important. Daniel obviously thought chapter 11 was important. So, up until 9:30 p.m. when I was sitting at work on Saturday night, I did not know how to proceed with this lesson, so you could call me a procrastinator, fine, but I wanted to get it right. And through a lot of prayer and thinking, I now have some knowledge of what this chapter is talking about. Much like the 70 weeks prophecy, there's a lot of detail given and events revealed in, well, mostly chapters 11 and 12. Like I said, all chapter 10 does is get us ready for it. But I didn't want to do a lesson on chapter 10 if I didn't understand chapter 11. And chapter 11 has nothing to do with bankruptcy. That's a grown-up joke, Hannah.
It's not funny.
That's because you're not a grown-up.
It will never be
All
funny.
right. So if you have your Bibles, turn to Daniel chapter 10. We're going to turn to our favorite trusty narrator here.
Yep, totally
So
favorite.
call.
Very favorite, totally. We all know this.
Daniel 10. In the third year of Cyrus king of Persia, a word was revealed to Daniel, who was named Belteshazzar. And the word was true, and it was a great conflict. And he understood the word and had understanding of the vision. In those days I, Daniel, was mourning for 3 weeks. I ate no delicacies, no meat or wine entered my mouth, nor did I anoint myself at all for the full 3 weeks. On the 24th day of the first month, as I was standing on the bank of the great river, that is, the Tigris, I lifted up my eyes and looked, and behold, a man clothed in linen, with a belt of fine gold from Uphaz around his waist. His body was like beryl, his face like the appearance of lightning, his eyes like flaming torches, his arms and legs like the gleam of burnished bronze, and the sound of his words like the sound of a multitude. And I, Daniel, alone saw the vision, for the men who were with me did not see the vision. But a great trembling fell upon them, and they fled to hide themselves. So I was left alone, and saw this great vision, and no strength was left in me. My radiant appearance was fearfully changed, and I retained no strength. Then I heard the sound of his words, and as I heard the sound of his words, I fell on my face in deep sleep, with my face to the ground.
So Cyrus was the king of Persia around the same time as Darius the Mede was king of Babylon. So the last vision that we had in Daniel, Daniel had not mentioned Cyrus king of Persia. Cyrus king of Persia and Darius the Mede were actually kind of co-ruling Medo-Persia at the same exact time, but Cyrus rose to power. The Persians took the lead. And so Daniel specifically mentions Cyrus at this time. Darius was the king that we hear about during the lion's den. Cyrus for this vision. So if it gives you an idea, it's near the same time, but it happens after, probably after when Daniel was in the lion's den. It's also after the vision of the 70 weeks. So he hears about this, where there are 490 years, and Daniel's troubled. He's worried about it, and he spends 3 weeks in mourning, praying, trying to understand what's happening. It's bothering him. I wasn't bothered for 3 full weeks, maybe a couple days, a few hours, and I definitely wouldn't go 3 weeks without eating delicacies, because that ain't happening. So, if you know me, you know that's true. Yep.
I totally don't know you.
So, this happens after the 70 weeks. Daniel's troubled. But it says that Daniel ate no delicacies. It doesn't mean he was fasting. He was eating food, he just wasn't eating fancy food. He wasn't eating the fancy stuff. He wasn't indulging. He was nervous. He had a lot on his mind. He was praying for the things that were going to come Right now, it's been 2,500 years since Daniel had this vision, but he was worried about it then.
You didn't even bath.
Anointing was what you would do before you walked into the temple or before you worshipped. You would anoint holy oil on yourself. So he didn't even do that. He may have bathed. I don't know.
That's what I was told.
I heard they ate sand, but whatever.
No.
They were in the desert. Think of it.
Too gritty.
So,
Between 18.
so the ram and the goat visions back in chapter 8, Daniel saw them in Susa, which is in modern day Iran. This vision, he's in Babylon. He's on the Tigris River, called the Great River. So just, he's not off traveling. He's in where he's lived the whole time. He sees the vision of somebody in fine linen that's pure white. We talked about before, we see a vision of somebody in pure white. It symbolizes purity. So, Daniel talks about the guy had gold of Uphaz. Now, when I was younger, I can remember reading about gold of Uphaz, and I thought that Uphaz was a type of gold, maybe a special, maybe it was a different color gold. No, it was gold that they mined in a place called Uphaz. So it's not a gemstone or a material, it's a place name. There was a place named Uphaz. I just found that out yesterday. So when I was your age, I thought Uphaz was a type of gold. Now you know. So what happens in the Bible is the names of places get updated as new powers take over. So it's probably a newer name for a place called Ophir. So the gold comes from Uphaz. The interesting thing is that a lot of Bible places, people know that they existed. They don't know exactly where they were. So when that happens, the exact locations are lost, so then everybody comes up with a crazy idea. And yesterday when I was sitting there laughing, and I said, I'll tell you about what it was, I saw a website where a guy tried to tell me that Uphaz and the Garden of Eden were in the Philippines, that maybe Uphaz was in Malaysia, next to the Petronas Towers, or that because there's a city in Alaska named Ophir, that they sailed to Alaska to pick up the gold, because there's gold in Alaska, there's gold in here. Yes.
There's nothing in Alaska. Well, you could technically call it oil gold, but that's
yeah. But any of these make sense? No.
Yeah.
So do we think that Uphaz was in the Philippines? Right now, I'm gonna get a phone call.
Oh, totally perfect time
You're
for a
like-
phone
Call
call.
from at 4 April, live.
Live.
Okay. Call somebody else. All right. So do we think that Uphaz was in the Philippines? Do we think the Garden of Eden was in Malaysia? Do we think the people that built the temple traveled all the way to Alaska?
Yes! I'm joking.
why would you
Oh,
go to Alaska just to get gold? Plus, there's no gold in
I'm
Alaska.
telling you, whenever there's specific details in the Bible that somebody can't answer, they come up with a wacky website. I told you the guy with France and that Germany was the and the Roman Catholic Church was the Antichrist. Yeah, people come up with crazy ideas. Most likely, Uphaz, Ophir were in the southern Arabian Peninsula, because if you think of the Jewish people where they sat. No, Paul. That's enough for the buzzer. I'm not gonna zap you anymore. Their world. You have to think of it in terms of what the Jewish people of the time knew. and how far they could travel. So most likely, if you were in Jerusalem and traveled down to the southern Arabian Peninsula, down here, this makes a little more sense. This is in modern-day Yemen, and there are actually ancient gold mines here. So, more than likely, the gold from Ufaz came from here.
Or they just robbed Ham.
Yep. The Israelites would have lived here, so it's not too awful far. They could have imported it. So, I don't think it was Singapore or Malaysia, Easter Island, Alaska.
Yeah, they went to Bermuda.
So, beryl is a crystal, and it is where emerald and aquamarine come from. So, emerald being the green form of beryl, aquamarine being the aquamarine form of beryl. Here's some examples of beryl. So this, yeah, it's very pretty.
Yeah, where's the wooden barrel?
This angel comes in. He's got a belt of gold, a face like, well, we'll say emerald, that shined like lightning. He had eyes that were like flaming torches, arms and legs that were burnished bronze. And when he spoke, it sounded like he had the words of an entire choir behind him, a multitude. This is very similar to a vision we see in the book of Revelation of God himself. And there are some Bible scholars that say, well, God himself showed up to Daniel. But that is a... Paul, you ready to do the buzzer?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that was it. Was it? Okay, very good.
Can I go use the bathroom?
I have to go to the bathroom. Larry, you can stop singing. All right. So this is... Daniel's there, and he sees this vision of an angel. And it's not the first time in the Bible that a heavenly vision happens and only one person can see it, or the other people that are there run away. It's happened to Moses, and it happened when Saul was on the road to Damascus and he turned into Paul. That's not funny, Paul. But, okay.
There's a different Paul.
It's a different Paul, yes.
In a different country.
Yes, it was a different country. The sight of the man and the sound of his words take your strength away. It made Daniel turn into a sack of wet noodles. He just fell to the ground. He couldn't talk. He couldn't move. This angel must have been powerful. Seeing an angel like that uptight with a face of lightning and eyes of torches of fire and all this, it just, Daniel, right to the ground. So, we're going to now turn our Bibles to Daniel chapter 10, verses 10 through 14.
And behold, a hand touched me, and set me trembling on my hands and knees. And he said to me, O Daniel, man greatly loved, understand the words that I speak to you, and stand upright, for now I have been sent to you. And when he had spoken this word to me, I stood up trembling. Then he said to me, Fear not, Daniel, for from the first day that you set your heart to understand, and humbled yourself before your God, your words have been heard, and I have come because of your words. The prince of the kingdom of Persia withstood me 21 days, but Michael, one of the chief princes, came to help me. For I was left there with the kings of Persia, and came to make you understand what is to happen to your people in the latter days. For the vision is for days yet to come.
So Daniel, there he is, lifeless. The sack of wet noodles on the ground with no power. First, the angel reaches down and picks him up, gets him to his hands and his knees. Then, the angel makes him stand up. 3 weeks, at the beginning of the chapter, Daniel talks 21 days. I didn't, I hardly ate anything. I was in prayer and concerned. The angel here tells Daniel that right the first time, the second that Daniel prayed, the angel heard them, but that spiritual warfare was going on. This angel was fighting with another angel, an evil one. So when the angel says, I was fighting, the Prince of Persia withstood me for 21 days, the Prince of Persia is not a comic book character or video game. The Prince of Persia was the angel assigned to the country of Persia. And at that time, it wasn't Israel, so it wasn't a good angel. So this angel that Daniel was talking to is fighting with this evil angel. For 3 whole weeks, Daniel's angel is trying to get to him to explain to him these visions, and this angel of Persia is in his way. You're not getting there. No. It's not happening. It's heavenly warfare. Each nation has an angel assigned to them. How far does it go from there? I don't know. I mean, you see Hallmark movies and everybody has their own guardian angel, but I'm not quite sure that's how it works. I am sure that each nation has an angel. There's an angel set to watch over the U.S., and there's one that watches over Israel, and as each nation rises and falls, there's an angel over them. Does the dog have an angel following them around? I don't know. And Daniel's told that the moment you started praying, we heard you. We tried to get to you, but the angel of the Prince of Persia stood my way. He got in my way. He wouldn't let me get to you. He would not let me help you. So 3 weeks of being blocked. Michael, one of the chief princes, so one of the highest angels, came to help me. So the reason why we know that this vision can't be Jesus is because another angel comes and helps him. Jesus doesn't need the help. He calls down angels to help him, not needs help from the angels. So we don't. This angel that had a face like lightning and arms like burnished bronze, and that's what an angel looks like. Something that'll sap the power right out of you when they talk to you. And Michael is one of the chief angels. For the vision is for days yet to come. So the angel comes and says, I'm going to tell you about something that's going to happen far into the future. And here we sit 2,500 years later, and it's still, we haven't gotten the end of this vision yet. So it bothered Daniel this much 2,500 years ago. We're going to turn on our Bibles to read the rest of Daniel chapter 10. Verses 15 through 21.
I bet Daniel and an angel in heaven.
Yes. All right.
When he had spoken to me according to these words, I turned my face toward the ground, and was mute. And behold, one in the likeness of the children of man touched my lips. Then I opened my mouth, and spoke. I said to him who stood before me, O my Lord, by reason of the vision pains have come upon me, and I retain no strength. How can my Lord's servant talk with my Lord? For now no strength remains in me, and no breath is left in me. Again one having the appearance of a man touched me, and strengthened me, and he said, O man greatly loved, fear not. Peace be with you. Be strong and of good courage. And as he spoke to me, I was strengthened, and said, Let my Lord speak, for you have strengthened me. Then he said, Do you know why I have come to you? But now I will return to fight against the prince of Persia, and when I go out, behold, the prince of Greece will come. But I will tell you what is inscribed in the book of truth. There is none who contends by my side against these, except Michael, your prince.
The angel talking has made Daniel go mute and completely taken his strength. That must have been something amazing to see. You know, not only did he look, you know, like he was on fire with lightning and, you know, on bronze and mouth like a multitude of people talking, he made Daniel turn into a sack of wet noodles, and he couldn't even talk. One in the likeness of the children of man touched my lips. The angels looked like humans. They weren't scary creatures. They looked like humans. So when it says one in the likeness of the children of man, angels looked like men. How am I supposed to talk to you? You took my energy and wiped me out. Daniel goes, listen, I'm weak. I'm mute. At this point, Daniel was like 70 to 80 years old. You know, the angel just wipes him out. But after the angel touches him, his strength is returned. The angel says to him, I've come to you to give you this vision, but then I need to go back and keep Persia's angel at bay. And then, shortly, the angel of Greece will get involved. So, in history, this follows the historical record. Persia was the world power at the time, and shortly, Macedonia, Alexander the Great, Greece, comes in. What we do find is that Michael is the angel assigned to Israel. And that's where we will leave until next week, when we get a little more specific about the things that are going to happen. If you're going to stay with us while we're singing, we're going to move on to a piece by Robin Mark, an Irish singer-songwriter called Ancient Words. If constraints don't allow it, I ask you to look the song up on your own and to listen to it. It talks about how the words written in the Bible thousands of years ago impact us today. So, Ancient Words is what we are going to sing next. If you do have to leave us due to whatever constraints, listen to the song sometime on your own.
Chapter 12.